I still remember the moment she walked in. Heels clicking, lips tight, attitude already filling the hallway before she even spoke. It was a Monday morning. I was at my desk, as usual, sorting through the latest client schedules, confirming lunch reservations, preparing the briefing notes for the weekly ops meeting. Things that didn't show up on a balance sheet, but made everything run smoothly. For the last 13 years, I'd been the executive assistant to Richard Langston, the founder and CEO of Langston and Company, a mid-size but fiercely respected consulting firm in Chicago. Richard built the company from the ground up. I joined in year 2, back when we worked out of a shared office space with a broken coffee machine and only 4 clients to our name. I've watched that company grow through economic slumps, legal battles, and 2 rebrands. I was there for every single one. So when the elevator doors opened and I saw her, Melanie Langston, his 28-year-old daughter, I felt something shift. She didn't greet me, didn't make eye contact. She walked past my desk like I was just a part of the decor, which, to be fair, was better than what came next. "Sarah, right?" she said as she turned back, sunglasses still on. "You're the secretary?" I smiled politely. "Executive assistant to the CEO." She smirked. "Right. Well, that position won't be necessary anymore. I'm restructuring. We're aiming for a more modern dynamic. Agile, flat hierarchy. You know." I blinked. "I'm sorry? You've been here? How long? 10 years?" 13, I said quietly. 13, she repeated, like it was something to be embarrassed about. "That's a lot of time behind a desk, but we're moving in a different direction. Effective immediately, your role is redundant." I stared at her, heart thudding in my ears. Was this real? No warning, no meeting, no explanation. Just a cold dismissal on a Monday morning. Still, I smiled. Calm, controlled. After all, you don't survive over a decade in corporate America without learning the value of silence. "No problem," I said. Melanie looked momentarily confused by how quickly I accepted it. No drama, no begging, no tears. "Great," she said, waving a manicured hand. "Pack up before lunch and HR will be in touch about your final paycheck." And just like that, she turned and disappeared into her new glass office, Richard's old office. I sat there for a moment, processing. Not because I didn't see it coming. Richard had been hinting for months that he was grooming her to take over. But I didn't expect that. Not the way she did it. Not the sheer lack of respect. I packed in silence. My coworkers glanced over but didn't dare say anything. Some looked away. A few looked sorry. I didn't blame them. It's hard to fight for someone when the person holding the sword is the boss's daughter. By noon, I was gone. I drove home in silence, heart pounding harder with every red light. Not because I was afraid, at least not just that, but because I knew things. Things Melanie didn't. Like how the client list was organized, how contracts were filed, which contacts required handwritten thank you notes, which clients needed monthly check-ins, and which ones would walk away if they didn't hear a familiar voice on the phone. I had been the quiet engine behind that company. Not flashy, not loud, but essential. And now I was out. Just like that. I didn't cry, not even once. Instead, I made tea, opened my laptop, and began to think about every client I had nurtured, every partner I had liaised with, every meeting I had prepared, sometimes single-handedly saving Richard's neck from major fallout. Melanie had made one crucial mistake. She underestimated me. She thought I was just a secretary, replaceable, irrelevant. But the thing is, when you pull a thread that's been holding the whole structure together, the unraveling doesn't happen instantly. It starts slow, subtle, but when it happens, it's unstoppable. And I had just been cut loose, with every name, every phone number, and every quiet secret tucked away in my personal notebook. She had no idea what was coming. Not yet. But she would. The next morning, I woke up early. out of habit more than necessity. For 13 years, my internal clock had been trained to rise before the sun, beat the inbox flood, and anticipate problems before anyone else even noticed them forming. But now, I didn't have a job, no commute, no meeting agendas to prep, just silence and an empty to-do list. Except that wasn't entirely true. Because Melanie Langston may have fired me, but what she didn't realize was that I didn't leave empty-handed. Not in the malicious sense. No documents or stolen property. I had too much integrity for that. But what I did have was my notebook. It was a plain leather-bound journal, the kind you buy in packs of 3 from office supply stores. I had filled dozens over the years, jotted notes, reminders, observations, and most importantly, relationship maps. Not just names and numbers, but who mattered to who. Which client hated being called before 10 a.m.? Which one only signed contracts on Wednesdays? Who preferred handwritten notes over emails? Which vendor once flew across the country just to meet Richard for lunch? And who did it out of obligation rather than loyalty? Melanie didn't ask about any of that. She never even glanced at my desk when she let me go. She thought she could just slide in, change the job titles, and the machine would keep running. But a company isn't a machine. It's a living, breathing ecosystem of relationships. And she had just severed the root system. By Wednesday, 2 days after my firing, I received my first call. It was from Gary Abrams, the head of acquisitions at Deerwood Financial, a client we had retained for over 9 years. "Sarah," he said, voice warm and confused. "We just got an automated email from some intern about the quarterly report. Is everything okay?" I paused. "They didn't notify you?" "About what?" "I'm no longer with Langston and Company." There was a silence on the other end. "You're kidding." "No." "Is Richard okay? Why would he?" "It was his daughter," I said simply. Gary grunted. "Melanie, she's in charge now?" "Yes." Another pause. "Well, that explains the mess. Listen, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but we trusted you. You were the reason we stuck around this long." "I appreciate that." "Number, I mean it. You made things work. You always got things done." We talked for another few minutes. He didn't come out and say he was pulling the account, but he didn't have to. I could hear it in his tone. That first crack. By Thursday, I got 3 more calls, then 2 emails. By Friday afternoon, I had heard from 7 clients. All confused, all disoriented. Some were angry, one furious, that Melanie had reassigned their account to someone who mispronounced their name in a Zoom call. "I thought we mattered to you," one message read. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I didn't work there anymore. But I logged each message in a new notebook. By Friday evening, I received a text from Nicole, a former coworker from the strategy team. She had always been kind, even when others treated me like I was invisible. "Hey, can I call you? Something's happening here." I replied, "Of course." 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. "Sarah," she said quickly, "Melanie's freaking out." "Why?" 3 of our top 5 clients have gone dark. No replies, no calls. One canceled a review meeting without rescheduling. She's pacing like a lion in a cage. I said nothing. She's blaming everyone. Claims the assistant she promoted doesn't know what she's doing. Shock of the century. But you know what she's not doing? What? She's not taking responsibility. She just keeps saying, "We'll win them back with innovation." Nicole laughed bitterly. "Sarah, she doesn't even know who to call. You were the only one who had personal rapport with most of them. She just assumed they'd stick around because the company name meant something." I stayed quiet for a long moment. Then, "Have you spoken to Richard?" "Not directly. He's out of town. Melanie told everyone she's cleaning house and taking the company into the next era." I could almost picture her saying it. Probably while wearing a power suit and giving someone an unearned lecture on synergy. Nicole's voice softened. "People here miss you. I miss them too." We hung up after a few more updates, and I sat on the couch, the house still and quiet around me. Melanie thought I was irrelevant. But here's the thing about people like her. They mistake visibility for value. They think if you're not the one giving the speeches or closing the deals on paper, you don't matter. But I mattered. And by the time Monday rolled around again, she'd know just how much. Because I hadn't made a single call. I didn't rally any troops. I hadn't said a word to a single client about my firing. They were walking away all on their own. All I had to do was wait, and listen, and document. Because the avalanche had started. And Melanie? She was standing right in its path. By Monday morning, it wasn't just a ripple. It was a wave. I hadn't set foot in the office since Melanie fired me. I hadn't sent any messages or warned anyone. Still, the company's once steady heartbeat had turned erratic. I could feel it without even being there. At 9:46 a.m., Nicole texted again. 3 more clients pulled out. Melanie's losing it. I stared at the screen and let the words sink in. In just 1 week, 6 major accounts had either gone quiet or formally severed ties. I opened my notebook and flipped to the names. These weren't just any clients. They were the firm's backbone. Each account worth hundreds of thousands annually. And each one had a deep history with Langston and Company. And with me. And yet Melanie hadn't bothered to reach out to a single one personally. Because why would she? In her mind, success was inherited. Respect was assumed. Loyalty was automatic. She never understood the truth. Loyalty is earned in the quiet moments. On late-night calls, handwritten notes, rescheduled meetings during snowstorms, remembered birthdays, and the quiet assurance that someone, somewhere, is keeping the train on the tracks. That was me, and I was gone. I received an unexpected email around 10:15 a.m. It was from one of our former vendors, Thomas, who provided analytics dashboards for several key clients. Subject line, just checking in. Hey Sarah, I just heard what happened. Melanie reached out to us Friday. Said you left for personal reasons. That didn't sound like you. I just wanted to say I always appreciated your professionalism. Hope you're okay. Thomas, I replied briefly, thanked him and wished him well. I didn't need to defend myself. The silence from Langston and Company was doing that for me. At noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, expecting another vendor or former colleague. Sarah. A deep, familiar voice said, "What the hell is going on?" It was Richard, the original CEO, Melanie's father. I straightened instinctively, even though I was home in leggings with a half-eaten sandwich on the table. Hello, Richard. I just landed an hour ago, he said. And my phone hasn't stopped ringing. Clients, partners, even one of our competitors. They're saying we've gone dark, that Melanie's made some sort of power play, and that you're gone? I paused. She fired me last Monday, said my position was no longer needed. There was a long silence. She what? She called me just a secretary. Another pause. I imagined him rubbing his temples the way he always did when stressed. She told me she was planning a reorg. I thought that meant streamlining some mid-level management, not firing the most trusted person in the building. You trusted me, I said. She didn't. I can't even begin to explain how furious I am, he said. And the clients... God, Sarah, I had no idea you had that kind of connection with them. They're not just clients. They're relationships. And they noticed when I disappeared. He sighed deeply. How many have we lost? I don't know the final count, but last I heard, at least 6 of the top 10 were reconsidering. She never even looked at the client ledger, he muttered. I can't believe I left the company in her hands. You left it in her hands without giving her the tools to understand it. Another silence. Then, where are you right now? Home? Stay there. Don't speak to anyone else about this. I need to see it for myself. He hung up. I sat quietly, trying to slow my pulse. There was a storm coming. Not the frantic kind, but the silent, calculated kind. The kind that shakes foundations. And I wasn't at the center of it anymore. I was the catalyst. At 3 p.m., I got another message from Nicole. Melanie just locked herself in her office. Legal is here. Something's happening. At 4:12 p.m., Richard called again. She didn't tell me anything, he said. No greeting this time. Didn't mention the firings, didn't warn me about the accounts. But you know what really hit me? What? She had no idea how the contracts were set up. You weren't just a secretary. You were listed on 4 client agreements as the point of contact. Some of them only signed because you were involved. I know. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I didn't need the credit. I just wanted the work to matter. There was a pause. His voice softened. It always did. I see that now. He sighed again, longer this time. She's not equipped for this. I didn't respond. Then finally, Sarah, what would it take for you to come back? I closed my eyes and let the question linger, because what I wanted wasn't just an apology. It was a reckoning. I didn't answer Richard's question right away. What would it take for you to come back? He asked it with urgency, but I let the silence linger. I knew he was pacing. I knew his mind was racing, trying to hold on to the remains of the company he'd built. Finally, I said, if I do come back, it won't be to sit quietly behind a desk. Name your terms, he replied without hesitation. Full decision-making authority over client services, I said, reporting directly to you. I want my title changed. I want access to all the reports and client data. And I want it in writing that Melanie will not have any authority over my work. There was a pause. Short, but telling. I can make that happen, he said. I'm not done, I continued. I want to implement a new onboarding system for staff, something we should have done years ago. I want a say in hiring, and I want Melanie to issue a formal internal statement acknowledging her error. Another pause. That last part might be difficult. I know, but if I'm coming back to clean up this mess, I want everyone to know exactly why the mess happened in the first place. He let out a slow breath. Understood. I knew then that he didn't just want me back. He needed me. Not out of guilt or loyalty, but out of cold, hard business necessity. The structure was crumbling, and I was the only one who still knew where the beams were. The next morning, I got an official email. Interim Director of Client Services. Immediate effect. Reporting directly to the CEO. Attached was the contract, signed and scanned. Everything I'd asked for. I arrived at the office just after 11 a.m. I didn't use the side entrance. I walked straight through the main lobby, heels clicking sharply across the marble floor. Every head turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. People watched me the way one might watch a phoenix walk back into the ashes. Nicole met me at the elevator. She looked like she wanted to hug me, but settled for a quiet nod. She's in the conference room, she whispered. Good. Richard was already inside when I stepped in. So was Melanie. She looked like a ghost. Pale, shoulders tense, jaw clenched so tightly you could hear it creak. A couple of department heads sat along the far wall, unsure whether to stand or sink into their chairs. I walked to the head of the table and placed my bag down calmly. Richard gestured for me to sit beside him. Melanie's eyes locked on me like I was a ghost she'd hoped never to see again. Richard cleared his throat. As some of you are aware, we've had a few operational disruptions. Disruptions? Melanie snapped. They're calling it a mass client exodus. Richard didn't flinch. Whatever we call it, we're responding now. Sarah has agreed to return in a leadership capacity. Effective immediately, Melanie's mouth dropped open slightly. What? You made a call without understanding the structure beneath it, he said bluntly. Now you're seeing the results. Sarah has the experience we need to regain control. This is not up for debate. Melanie laughed bitterly. She's a secretary, or did we all forget that? No, I said, locking eyes with her. You forgot that I was the bridge between your clients and your contracts. You forgot that I knew them. Not just their names, but their patterns, their expectations, their values. And most of all, you forgot that companies don't thrive on hierarchy. They thrive on trust. She stood abruptly. So what? You're here to humiliate me? No, I replied. I'm here to save what's left. Melanie looked at her father. You're really letting her do this? I'm not letting her, he said. I'm asking her, and you should be grateful she said yes. There was a long, excruciating silence. Melanie didn't sit back down. She turned and walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft but final click. Richard turned to the others. We'll be issuing a statement this afternoon to our remaining clients. Sarah will be the point of contact for all retention efforts. The department heads nodded. Some looked visibly relieved. I stood. I'll need access to all the communications logs from the last 3 weeks. I want to know exactly where we stand. Richard nodded. It's yours. I left the conference room with purpose, my pulse calm but steady. Melanie had walked in a week ago thinking she could wipe the slate clean and rebuild from scratch. But she had no idea that the foundation she demolished was the only thing keeping the company upright. And now, I was the one holding the pieces. But I wasn't putting them back the way they were. I was building something stronger, something better. And she was officially on the outside. Over the next 48 hours, I barely looked up from my desk. The first step was stabilizing what was left. My inbox had turned into a battlefield. Clients confused, nervous, some angry. Others had gone completely silent, and that was worse. I knew the signs. Silence meant conversations were already happening with competitors. I reached out personally. No canned messages, no marketing fluff. I wrote each email myself, tailoring them with the kind of detail that only comes from years of real connection. Birthdays, kids' names, client-specific frustrations I had resolved at 11 p.m. on weekends. I wasn't just asking them to stay. I was reminding them why they had chosen us in the first place. By the end of day 2, I'd spoken to 14 clients. 9 of them confirmed they were open to renegotiation. 5 were non-committal, but I could tell I'd at least bought us time. It was more than Melanie had managed in a week. Nicole came by that afternoon with 2 cups of coffee. You look like you haven't blinked since this morning. I probably haven't. She hesitated before setting the cup down. I don't mean to stir the pot, but Melanie's been telling people she was the one who asked you to come back. I smiled faintly. Let her. You're not going to correct it? I don't need to. People are watching. They can see who's actually fixing things. Nicole nodded slowly. Still, it's pathetic. That's desperation, I said, and desperation always leaves a trail. Later that evening, I was in the conference room when Richard walked in. He looked older than I remembered, more worn. The weight of the week had settled in his shoulders. How bad is it? He asked. Realistically? We've already lost close to 80% of our high-value accounts. If we don't salvage the rest in the next 10 days, we'll have to consider downsizing. Heavily. He exhaled sharply and sat down across from me. I never thought it would unravel this fast. Because you underestimated the glue. He looked up. You mean you? I didn't respond. He leaned forward. Sarah, I let my daughter run this company into the ground. I thought giving her the title would make her rise to it. But she used it like a shield. She didn't lead. She ruled. Titles don't make leaders, I said. Actions do. He nodded slowly. So what happens now? You let me finish what I started. You give me room to rebuild our reputation, and not just externally. Internally, too. Staff morale is in the basement. People are scared. They don't trust leadership right now. We can't sell stability to clients if our own house is chaos. He tilted his head. And Melanie? I don't need her gone, but I do need her out of my way. He gave a faint, tired smile. Consider it done. By the end of the week, we had launched a formal outreach campaign. Every team member was assigned a list of clients to call, guided by templates I created. Every interaction was documented. Every concern tracked. We shifted focus away from excuses and toward accountability. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral, but it was real. And it was working. On Friday afternoon, I was reviewing a new draft contract when Melanie stormed into my office. Uninvited, red-faced, her voice sharp. "You've been undermining me." I looked up, calm. "Good afternoon, Melanie." "Don't play nice. You've been erasing me, taking over everything. People look at you like you're the CEO. I'm just doing my job." "You're doing my job. I'm the future of this company." "No," I said evenly. "You were the experiment. The future is still being decided." She laughed coldly. "You think you've won because you got your little title and fixed a few contracts?" "I think I've been trusted. By the clients, by the staff, and by your father. Trust is not something you inherit, Melanie. It's something you earn." She glared at me, then stormed out. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just turned back to the contract and kept working. Because when you know your worth, you don't need to prove it by shouting. You show it, every single day through results. And the results were becoming undeniable. By Monday morning, the company felt different. Not fixed, not yet, but different. The hallways had gone from dead quiet to cautiously alive. Staff meetings were no longer dominated by fear or silence. People were speaking up again. Department heads were submitting ideas instead of excuses. And when they passed me in the corridor, they nodded, not out of obligation, but recognition. They knew. They all knew now. I wasn't just the woman who once sat quietly behind a desk scheduling flights and fixing calendar overlaps. I was the one who had held this place together. The one who rebuilt what arrogance almost destroyed. And Melanie? She had grown quieter, colder. Her presence, once loud and commanding, had become a ghost in the background, seen but no longer felt. She wasn't fired, not officially, but she had been removed from decision-making. Her badge still worked. Her office still had her name on the door, but the trust was gone, and she could feel it. So could I. On Tuesday, Richard called me into his office. His expression was serious, but his eyes, tired as they were, held something I hadn't seen in weeks. Calm. He gestured for me to sit. "We've stabilized," he began. "Your numbers saved us. I reviewed the final client retention reports this morning. We managed to recover 60% of our lost accounts." "I know. I spoke with most of them myself." He nodded. "And the board knows that. They also know you wrote the internal recovery plan. You trained the interim client teams. You managed staff communications during one of the most volatile months we've ever had." I waited. He reached for a folder. Inside was a formal offer letter. "I want you to stay on permanently as Chief Client Officer, executive title. You'll oversee all client relations strategy. Full autonomy. You'll report only to me." I looked down at the offer. The salary bump was generous. The benefits, upgraded. But none of that was why I said yes. I said yes because this time the title matched the truth. I stood and shook his hand. "I'll accept, on one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "I want to create a mentorship program. For women, for support staff, for people who've been seen as just something, just a secretary, just an assistant, just a junior. I want to make sure no one else is ever underestimated the way I was." His face broke into a full, rare smile. "Consider it done." I left his office with the letter in hand and a fire in my chest. Not anger, not revenge. Purpose. That afternoon, as I was walking past the glass conference room where Melanie once held court, I saw her standing alone. She was staring out the window, arms crossed, her reflection half merged with the skyline. She turned when she noticed me. Her eyes were tired. No makeup, no posture, no pretense. Just a young woman who had mistaken authority for power and power for invincibility. "I know you think I don't deserve this office," she said quietly. "I don't think anything," I replied. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. It's about what you do once you're given a chance. She looked away. You made me look weak. No, I said, voice firm. You did that all on your own. I just refused to cover for it. Silence filled the space between us. Then she asked, almost like a child, Did you hate me? No, I answered truthfully. I pitied you, because you walked into a legacy built by your father and never bothered to understand the people who helped build it. She didn't respond. I left her there. Later that evening, I sat in my new office. Glass walls, a view of the river, a nameplate that finally felt earned. I pulled out the old notebook from my bag. The one where it all started. Its pages were worn, ink fading in places, corners bent from years of flipping back and forth. I turned to the final page and wrote one last note. It's not about the title on your door. It's about the trust behind it. Weeks passed. The company didn't just recover. It evolved. The mentorship program launched quietly but gained traction fast. Within months, we had tripled engagement scores. Former interns and assistants began stepping into new roles. Confidence spread like wildfire, and clients noticed. Because in the end, people don't stay loyal to logos or slogans or leadership charts. They stay loyal to people who show up when it matters most. And I had shown up. Even when I'd been told I was irrelevant. Even when I was discarded like office clutter. I hadn't burned the building down. I just let it collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. And when the dust settled, I didn't point fingers. I got to work. That's what real leadership looks like. And that's a legacy no one can take away. I still remember the exact moment everything changed. The office looked the same. The humming of computers, the stale scent of printer paper, the morning sun casting golden stripes across my desk. But nothing was the same. Because the man who now stood in front of us wasn't my boss. He was my boss's son, and he had just inherited the company. Good morning, everyone, he said, clapping his hands together like he was starting a motivational seminar. As of this morning, I'm the new CEO. A polite, scattered round of applause followed. I didn't clap. Not because I was bitter, at least not yet, but because I already knew what kind of person he was. I had worked at Hamilton Tech Solutions for 17 years. I was there before his father even bought the building. I had helped build the infrastructure, wrote the very code the company ran on, designed the internal systems, and trained every new IT staff member myself. I wasn't just an employee. I was the backbone. But to Jason Hamilton, I was just another face in the crowd. An outdated relic from a time he wanted to erase. His father, Richard Hamilton, was nothing like him. Richard was old school but fair. He believed in loyalty and he appreciated dedication. He wasn't a tech genius, far from it, but he knew the value of the people who made things run. When his health started declining, he stepped back and left the company in good hands. At least, that's what he thought. I watched Jason as he strutted through the office like he was doing us a favor by existing. Designer suit, hair slicked back, jaw tight with smug ambition. He had a point to prove, and unfortunately that meant cleaning house. Some changes are coming, he said with a fake smile. Efficiency, optimization, streamlining. The usual. Some of you may not fit into the new vision of Hamilton Tech. I felt the eyes of my team drift toward me. They knew. Jason never liked me. Not because I did anything wrong. On the contrary. I had caught one of his disastrous coding attempts during an internship he barely showed up for. I saved the company from a major system breach he nearly caused. I didn't throw him under the bus back then. Maybe I should have. Later that afternoon, I got the email. Meeting at 4 p.m. CEO's office. Jason Hamilton. I didn't panic. Not yet. I gathered my notes and calmly walked in. He didn't even look up when I entered. Sit, he said coldly. I sat. He closed his laptop with a smug little flourish and leaned back. Lisa, you've been here a long time. Yes, almost 2 decades, I said. He smirked. Exactly. A long time to be doing… what exactly? Patching legacy code? Babysitting the system? I stayed silent. I knew where this was going. He leaned forward, his voice sharper now. I won't spend another dime on a worthless employee. You're done here. I nodded slowly, my heart pounding, but my face calm. Got it. Jason blinked as if he expected me to beg or argue. When I didn't, he smirked again. Smart. At least you're not dramatic. I stood up, pushed the chair back gently, and turned to leave. Oh, and HR will reach out about severance, he added, almost as an afterthought. I paused at the door. Per the contract I signed with your father, severance is automatic, but you might want to check the terms of that agreement. He looked confused, but I didn't wait for a response. I walked out. Not just from his office, from the entire building. And when I got home, I opened my laptop. Because there was something Jason didn't know. When Richard promoted me to head systems architect 3 years ago, he added a very specific clause to my contract. One Jason hadn't bothered to read. One that gave me control. Control over every internal system, every access point, every security layer. And if I was ever terminated without just cause, I had the legal right to wipe the slate clean. I wasn't vengeful by nature. But what Jason had done wasn't just cruel. It was stupid. Because now he'd have to learn very quickly what this worthless employee was actually worth. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset. I had long since learned not to take corporate betrayal personally, but because I was preparing. Every system, every line of code, every security protocol I had designed over the years was now in my hands. Jason had no idea what he'd signed off on. 3 years ago, when Richard promoted me to head systems architect, I told him something very specific. If I'm going to take full accountability for every system this company depends on, I need protection. Richard agreed. He trusted me. He valued me. So, together with the company's legal team, we drafted a clause that most CEOs would never allow. If I were ever terminated without just cause or severance, as defined by the contract, I had full authority to revoke my access, shut down all administrator rights, and remove proprietary system integrations. In short, I could wipe it clean. The clause was buried halfway through the contract under Emergency System Governance. I doubted Jason had read past the title page. The next morning, I woke up, brushed my hair, made some coffee, and sat down at my desk with a deep breath. I opened the remote systems dashboard. Every critical platform was still tied to my credentials. Jason hadn't even reassigned permissions. HR hadn't contacted me. No exit interview. No formal handover. He really thought I'd just vanish quietly. I hovered my mouse over the Emergency Lockdown Protocol tab and clicked. Immediately, a chain reaction began. Employee portal, deactivated payroll access, locked internal messaging platform, shut down CRM and client contact systems, frozen servers, still active but restricted from internal access. One by one, I watched the lifeblood of the company pulse, and then flicker out. I didn't delete anything. That would have been illegal. But per the clause, I had the right to disable access until a legal resolution was reached. It was a nuclear option designed for worst-case scenarios. This qualified. By noon, my phone was buzzing. Blocked number, then again, then a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Mark, senior IT analyst. Hey, something's wrong with the system. Everything's going dark. Did you do something? Jason is losing it. I didn't respond. A few minutes later, a call came in from the company's front desk. I ignored it. Then, finally, Jason called. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I answered, calm as ever. Lisa speaking. What? Did you do? He barked, not even pretending to be civil. I could hear panic in the background. Phones ringing, people shouting. the hollow tone of someone who had completely lost control. I followed the contract, I said simply. You should read it sometime. You shut down the entire system, he shouted. No, I said. I locked access to it. There's a difference. You're insane. No, Jason, I'm prepared. You made a decision without understanding the consequences. That's on you. I could hear him pacing now. He was furious, but underneath that, he was scared. He didn't understand how the systems worked. He thought firing me was just crossing off a name. He never realized how much I had built. How do I fix this? He asked, his voice sharp but quieter now. You don't, I replied. You're not authorized to make changes. There was a long pause. Then quietly. So what do you want? I could have said money. I could have demanded a massive payout, or an apology, or even my job back. But none of that mattered anymore. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. I want you to admit you were wrong, I said. Publicly. Not just to me. To your team. To your board. To the people who watched you dismantle a company you weren't ready to lead. He laughed bitterly. You think I'm going to humiliate myself over this? I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. I think you don't have a choice. Then I hung up. I spent the rest of the day answering messages from my former coworkers. Some were stunned. Others were quietly cheering me on. They'd seen the writing on the wall the moment Jason took over. But none of them knew what was coming next. Because Jason had just made the biggest mistake of his short career. And by the end of the week, he would be begging for help. 2 days. That's all it took for chaos to spread through Hamilton Tech like wildfire. The systems I had locked down weren't just a convenience. They were the company's central nervous system. Payroll didn't process. Client accounts became inaccessible. Customer service couldn't reply to tickets. Even the office coffee machine was glitching because it ran on the same cloud-linked admin panel I had architected. By the third morning, I got a text from an unknown number. The board is calling an emergency session today. Jason's in trouble. Just thought you'd want to know. No name, but I had a good guess. Mark? Maybe. Or someone from accounting. I had quietly earned the trust of more people in that office than Jason ever realized. Meanwhile, I was back to my freelance consulting work. My own clients, my own hours, my peace. But as much as I tried to ignore it, a part of me kept refreshing the news alerts and company chatter. Because this wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about watching a house of arrogance fall, brick by brick. Later that afternoon, the call came. Not from Jason this time. From a private number. Miss Carter, this is Diane Hart from the Board of Directors. We need to speak with you. Her tone was crisp, measured. The voice of someone used to holding power, but trying to stay polite. Of course, I said. When? As soon as possible. We'd like to meet over video in the next hour if you're available. She wasn't asking. I joined the call in a crisp black blazer, hair tied back, the same way I used to look when giving quarterly IT updates. 6 board members sat in sleek chairs behind polished mahogany tables. In the center of the screen, Jason, looking like a deflated version of himself. Collar loose, eyes red. His swagger had vanished. Lisa, Diane began, we understand there's been a disruption to our internal systems. That's correct, I replied evenly. And you were the architect behind those systems? I was, I said, for the past 6 years. And per the clause in your executive contract, you had authority to revoke access in the event of wrongful termination? Only under specific conditions. Yes, I said, leaning slightly forward. One of which was termination without severance. Jason shifted. I could tell he wanted to interject, but he didn't. He couldn't. And you were offered no severance? Diane asked. I was not. Jason called me into his office, told me I was worthless, and that he wouldn't spend another dime on me. Silence. A few board members exchanged glances. Someone coughed awkwardly. Diane turned to Jason. Is that true? Jason cleared his throat. Look, I didn't think she'd actually answer the question. He glanced away. I didn't review her contract fully. I thought it was boilerplate. I raised my eyebrows. It wasn't. Diane took a slow breath. So, just to clarify, the systems are not deleted, but access is restricted? Correct, I said. They're secure, no data loss. I followed the protocol exactly as written. And what would it take to restore access? I paused. I wanted to make this clear, not just for them, but for Jason. An official retraction of my termination, a signed letter acknowledging the breach of contract, and a formal public apology from Mr. Hamilton. Jason's head snapped toward the camera. Are you serious? I'm very serious, I said. You publicly humiliated me. You terminated me without cause, without severance, and without any understanding of the systems I designed. You don't just get to press undo. Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. We'll take your terms under advisement. Thank you, Ms. Carter. I logged off. That evening, I took a walk. The sky was low with gray clouds, the kind of soft overcast that made the streetlights glow like halos. 17 years. That's how long I gave that company. Through late nights, system failures, mergers, and panic mode deadlines, I stayed. I delivered. I never asked for more than what I earned. And Jason dismissed all of it with a single sentence. But now? Now he was learning something his father had understood from day one. Loyalty is earned, not inherited. I didn't want to destroy the company, but I wasn't going to save it at my own expense. And if Jason wanted to keep pretending he was in control, he was going to watch the entire machine fall apart without me. Jason didn't apologize. Not that day. Not the next. Not even after the company's main clients began to pull their contracts. He was still convinced he could fix it. I heard through a friend in accounting, off the record of course, that Jason had brought in an external IT firm. They promised they could regain system access within 72 hours. What they didn't know was that I had built it like a fortress, not to be vengeful, to be secure. Because the kinds of systems Hamilton Tech relied on housed sensitive data. Legal documents, employee records, payroll structures, internal audits, client contracts. When Richard gave me full autonomy, he also trusted me to design protections in case of a breach. Ironically, I became the breach Jason hadn't seen coming. By the fourth day, the board was under pressure. Key vendors were threatening legal action. The finance department couldn't process invoices. And several government contracts, ones that required stringent security compliance, were on the verge of cancellation. That evening, my phone rang again. It wasn't Diane. It was Richard. Yes, Richard Hamilton, the founder, Jason's father. Lisa, he said, his voice slower than I remembered, but firm. I heard what happened. Hello, Mr. Hamilton, I said, surprised. I wasn't expecting your call. I should have called earlier. I've been out of it lately. But Diane briefed me. I read everything, including the contract you and I signed. There was a pause. He cleared his throat. I want you to know, I stand by that agreement. I gave you that power because you earned it, and I see now how necessary it was. Thank you, I said softly. That means more than you know. He hesitated. Would you be open to a meeting? Just you and me. No board, no Jason. I agreed. The next afternoon, I met him at a quiet cafe just outside the city. He looked older, frailer, but his eyes were still sharp. I trusted Jason to lead with wisdom, he said after we sat down. Instead, he led with ego. He looked directly at me. You were the one person I knew would protect the foundation of what we built. And now, you're the one person who can save it. I didn't reply right away. I watched him sip his tea, the cup trembling slightly in his hands. I'm not asking you to forgive him, he said. I'm asking if you'll help fix this, for the sake of the company, for the people who still depend on it. My jaw tightened. He called me worthless, in front of his staff. Terminated me like I was nothing. If I come back, I want it to mean something. Richard nodded. I understand. And I think it's time we talk about that. He slid a document across the table. It was a formal offer. Not for reinstatement, but for partnership. Co-ownership. Permanent rights to the system I built. A public acknowledgement of my role in Hamilton Tech's growth. And full authority to oversee the transition to new leadership. Jason? I asked, eyebrows raised. We'll be stepping down, Richard said firmly. After the board meeting tomorrow, he doesn't know yet, but it's already in motion. I blinked. And who replaces him? Richard smiled. We're open to nominations. It didn't hit me right away, but when it did, I shook my head. I don't want to run the company. I didn't say you had to, he replied, but you should be the one helping choose who does. That night, I reviewed the documents. Everything was real. The contract was airtight. And for the first time since I walked out of that building, I had peace. But I also had one more decision to make. The next morning, I stood in front of the board again. This time, not as a disgraced employee or a desperate contractor. I stood as someone whose value had finally been acknowledged. Jason was there too, eyes hollow, shoulders heavy. He didn't speak. Diane turned to me. Lisa, do you wish to restore the system? I nodded. Yes, under one condition. Which is? That the entire IT department receives back pay for the hours they've worked trying to clean up someone else's mess, and that every engineer under my former team gets a raise and permanent status. Diane looked impressed. Done. I entered the admin panel on my laptop, typed a few commands. Hit execute. The lights flickered on at Hamilton Tech. The heartbeat returned. I looked at Jason one last time. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't need him to. This wasn't his story anymore. The system was back online. Emails were flowing. Salaries were processed. Clients returned. From the outside, it looked like the storm had passed. But inside me, something still lingered. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt powerful. But all I felt was tired. 17 years. 17 years of late nights and early mornings, of eating lunch at my desk, of fixing what others broke, of holding up a company that never once made the effort to hold me back. And when I thought of how quickly Jason had tossed it all away with one sentence, I won't spend another dime on a worthless employee? A quiet ache settled behind my ribs. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about worth, and how easily the world can pretend not to see it. I spent the next week transitioning the IT systems over to a new team, one I personally helped hire. I didn't want my name to be the only one holding up the infrastructure anymore. If I had learned anything, it was this. No one should ever be a single point of failure. Not even me. One afternoon, I found myself back in the old server room. The hum of machines, the blinking lights, the faint chill of recycled air. It was all exactly how I remembered it. Except now, I wasn't there to fix anything. I was there to say goodbye. Mark, my former colleague, found me there. I heard Jason moved out of the executive suite today, he said softly. I nodded. About time. He never said a word to anyone, just packed up and left. Did you expect him to? I asked. Mark shrugged. Number. But I hoped maybe he'd at least say something to you. I don't need his words, I said. He already gave me his silence when it mattered. Mark smiled faintly. You know, we all watched what you did. Every single one of us. And we weren't just impressed, we were proud. That caught me off guard. Proud? Yeah, he said. You stood up for all of us. For every employee who's ever been undervalued. For every woman who's ever been told she's just something. For everyone who's ever been discarded by someone who thought a title meant intelligence. I blinked. My throat tightened unexpectedly. You made us believe again, Lisa, he added. I had no words, just a quiet, grateful smile. That weekend, I visited my parents' grave. I hadn't been in months. They were both teachers, modest people who believed in effort over ego. When I first got the job at Hamilton Tech, they celebrated like I'd won the lottery. When I worked late into the night, they brought me food. When I was overlooked for promotion after promotion, they told me to keep going. I sat down between the headstones and rested my palms on the grass. I did it, I whispered. Not just for me, for everyone like me. For every person who was told they weren't enough. For every worker who got laid off with nothing but an empty box and a forced smile. For every unseen genius sitting in the back of a cubicle, making everything run while someone else took the credit. I stayed for a while, just breathing, listening to the wind in the trees, letting the silence wrap around me like a coat. The following Monday, I returned to the company one last time. Richard had asked me to come in, not for work, but for a formal ceremony. They wanted to honor me. I had hesitated, but eventually said yes. The entire company gathered in the main atrium. There were speeches, clapping, even a few tears. Then Richard stepped forward. He handed me a glass plaque etched with gold lettering. It read, "For 17 years of dedication, brilliance, and unshakable integrity, Lisa Carter." The applause that followed was long, loud, and sincere. But what moved me most was the line of employees who waited afterward just to shake my hand. Young engineers, admin staff, janitors, managers, people from every department. One woman, fresh out of college, held my hand a moment longer than the others. "I want to be like you someday," she said. I smiled. "Then be better than me. Start with that." That night, I went home, lit a candle, made some tea. And finally, for the first time in years, I slept without setting an alarm. Because I knew the company would be fine. And more importantly, so would I. 2 months had passed since the day I restored Hamilton Tech's systems. Life had returned to normal, at least on the surface. The company was running again, its operations smooth, its future no longer dangling by a thread. But Jason Hamilton had vanished from the tech world almost as quickly as he'd stormed into it. Word got around fast. Investors pulled out. Clients questioned the company's leadership. Board members whispered about the embarrassment he had caused. And just like that, the golden boy who once smirked at me from behind a mahogany desk was gone. No new title, no shiny venture, just radio silence. I didn't celebrate. Not out loud. I didn't post about it. I didn't gloat. Because I didn't need to. People like Jason implode all on their own. They think power is inherited, not earned. They think people are replaceable. They think they'll never fall. Until they do. And when they finally crash, it's not the sound of impact that matters. It's the silence that follows. One afternoon, while sipping coffee in my home office, I got a message from someone unexpected. "Hey, it's been a while. Can I call?" Jason. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't owe him anything, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. His voice was quieter than I remembered. No arrogance, no smirk in his tone. Just exhaustion. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from," he began. "You're not wrong," I said calmly. There was a pause. "I just wanted to say I was wrong about everything." I didn't reply. I let the silence stretch. Let it sting a little. "I didn't understand what you did. How much you carried. I thought, I don't know, that tech was just tools. Replaceable. I thought loyalty was optional." "It's not," I finally said. "It never was." "I've lost everything," he admitted. "Even my dad doesn't return my calls anymore." "That's between you and him," I said. "Not my business." He sighed. "You don't have to forgive me. I just needed to say it." "Then say it clearly." He took a breath. "I'm sorry, Lisa, for disrespecting you, for underestimating you, for not reading the damn contract. You didn't deserve any of that." I let his words hang there for a moment before answering. Apology accepted, I said, but don't mistake that for forgetting. I wouldn't dare. And that was it. He hung up. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Not because I needed his apology, but because hearing it reminded me how far I'd come. A few weeks later, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for my own company's new office. Carter Systems. It wasn't flashy. No marble floors, no glass walls. Just clean desks, fast computers, and a team of sharp, passionate engineers. Some of them from my old Hamilton team. Others, fresh graduates with eyes full of wonder. I gave a short speech. Nothing grand. Just the truth. I built my career in the shadows, I said. I was called just an employee, overlooked, undervalued, underpaid. But I kept building, because I believed in what I could do, even when others didn't. I paused, looked around the room. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Your worth is not determined by who sees you. It's determined by what you create, how you show up, and how you carry yourself when no one's watching. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was real. And in that moment, I didn't feel tired anymore. I felt whole. Today, I spend my days mentoring young tech professionals. I teach them not just how to write code, but how to write contracts, how to protect themselves, how to say no, how to demand respect. Hamilton Tech still exists, but it looks different now. Richard quietly retired. A new CEO, a woman named Dana, took over. She reached out to me for guidance during the transition. I told her one thing. Take care of your people, and they'll take care of the company. It's a lesson some never learn, and for others, it changes everything. As for Jason, last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment on the edge of the city. No one calls him Mr. Hamilton anymore. And in the tech world, his name is rarely spoken. But mine? It's on contracts now, on invoices, on systems, on the front door of a company I built from the ground up. Lisa Carter. Not a worthless employee, not a forgotten name, but a builder, a fighter, a woman who rewrote her own ending.